Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another session of industry videos by BBGA and some of the other associations. We're really fortunate today to have Alex Durand, MD of Saxonair, and John Norris, MD of Aviate, to have a discussion with us about market conditions, aircraft sales and acquisitions, and we'll maybe touch on some other areas like Brexit and even recruitment and the future of our industry. By way, before we do more of an introduction from you guys, I wanted to set the scene a little bit about what we've been seeing in some of the recent reports that have come out from economic reviews. Last week, I was shown some data from WingX that gave a position of what's happening to the market in general, and it segmented our sector, business aviation in particular, and commercial GA, versus the scheduled airlines in UK and in Europe. And it was ever so striking that there appears to be good recovery going on for some areas of business aviation within Europe for certain. And the short haul particularly. The long haul is still dead as a dodo because you can't get in anywhere. Whereas the scheduled airlines are really struggling and are somewhere between 10 and 20% of their previous market. So I'm going to start with yourself, John. Just quick intro of your organisation, and then what's the market position as far as you're concerned? What are you seeing at the moment?
Okay, thanks, Mark, and thank you for inviting me today. So Aviate Jet, we're a sales and management company, and we provide support for owners and operators for NCC aircraft, and we do software solutions for them. But specifically, we do a lot of aircraft transactions. And what we've observed is that obviously in Q1, Q2, we saw the total number of transactions, quite drastically reduced from Q4, Q3 last year, which were terrific quarters. But the interesting thing is that we didn't see a corresponding increase in the amount of inventory. And if you look back at 08, 09, at the depression then, when you had the number of available aircraft go up from about 10% to about 15% of the market, you got a lot of downward pressure on prices. We haven't seen that through COVID, and which is very encouraging. So without downward pressure on prices and the inventories level, buyers are getting the confidence to buy, and we're actually starting to see transaction levels recover quite well, particularly at the bottom end of the market.
So, I mean, that's a positive picture. And I've got to say, over the last few weeks, I've been picking up snippets like that, where others in our sector some have been saying they've had better periods than the previous year as a consequence of the current shape of the market. Yet there are others that are still suffering badly. So it's just that it's not the same that we've seen before. So some lessons to be taken from it early on. Anything else to add to that, John, at all?
Well, I would say that this is a grassroots recovery. So the people that are looking to acquire their first-time entrants, which is very exciting because I'm so used to repeat business with the same clients coming back, but we're getting a lot of new people talking about perhaps wouldn't have considered private aviation before, are looking for the first time to acquire a whole or half share in an aircraft. And that's great for the industry to get new owners come into it.
Intriguing. That's it's a hopeful sign. Alex, from your point of view, now you've got the benefit of being involved in rotary and fixed wing. So, quick intro for people who don't know your business, and what are you seeing?
Sure, thanks, Mark. Thanks for the opportunity to join the call. I'm Alex Durand. I'm the CEO of Klein Aviation Group, of which Saxonair Charter is the owning, operating and charter part of the business. We have a fixed wing and a rotary AOC, so we have quite a wide footprint across aviation. I think within the charter sector, I'd echo what John said, there is definitely signs of new entrants to the market, there's new interest. I think there's a strange comparison. It's a recovery, but then if you look, we're probably, at what point do you call that? If you go pre-COVID, I'd say it's pretty much unchanged. I'd say the interest the activity levels are about the same. But if you look at where we were in full lockdown, it's improving rapidly, and that's only compromised by the state of lockdowns, changing quarantines, etc. But I think the core demand is there, and I think there's a positive from that. It's as we hear about depressions and worst ever figures. Actually, everything was going okay across economies before COVID. So if you look at it as a disruption, normal service is being resumed to a degree. We are seeing that on all ranges of rotary, fixed wing, large, small jets. I think potentially the longer range stuff has taken a bit of a dip. But generally, it's recognisably the same.
And that's interesting. I was going to pursue that point for the point that the mix of aircraft types that you're dealing with. The info I got back from the likes of WinX is that they'd seen a real reduction in the transaction of what was going on with the longer range aircraft, but a significant activity on the medium to lower side. What do you reckon, John? Are you seeing a different mix on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're only a small operator and a private operator for a number of owners, but yeah, we're not seeing much long haul activity, particularly to the States, and that's basically due to the travel restrictions and risks involved in going there. But the smaller mid-size aircraft that we operate for owners, they've pretty much returned to sort of normal operations.
Okay. You said something. I'm going to go slightly off-piste in terms of a quick question, and that is the impact on your owners and operators. You've seen what's going on with the corridors and now regional corridors being mentioned. Do you think if we had something to do with testing, do you see there would be any difference to the market if we had that facility available to us?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've done a lot of research, as everyone has, on COVID and best practices and stuff like that for our operation and our owners. And it's incredibly difficult because, of course, we get different news every day. And if we operate to a specific country, we can get different advice from different airports within that country about what forms they need. So it's quite challenging. And then when they do visit, of course, they don't know whether they have to, sometimes it's difficult to know what date by which they have to get back by to sort of avoid the 14-day quarantine. So it's a dynamic and fluid situation, and our operations director is going grey through the process.
Yeah, I think if ministers and secretaries of state can get caught out by the quarantine, then we shouldn't be surprised.
Indeed, yeah.
What do you reckon, Alex? What have you seen for your clients? What do you think of the whole concept of the corridors, the partial corridors, and testing? What value is there in this?
Well, I think clients want to see consistency, which has been incredibly hard to achieve, and it's not for us to comment. Obviously, every country has their own difficulties and challenges, but one of there seems to be a different philosophy where a lot of countries are adopting testing as a way of reducing the risk and trying to control access and keep continuity. And there seems to be in the UK particularly a resistance to that. We've looked quite a lot at various aspects of how you would apply testing, and the feedback we have is that would be wanted. People want control, they want to know. So if we could test before they were within our operation, they have a level of security. And if you go particularly outside of Europe, it's a requirement in many places that you prove you've been tested. So I think for us, it would benefit our sector particularly. We are different to main airport terminals. We have far fewer touch points. We have far more control over how we can apply that regime. The numbers are lower. And I think if there was an exemption or some mechanism where we could do that, I think it would benefit us. And I think ultimately our clients want certainty as far as it can be given, and I think it would help with that.
Yeah, any other thoughts on that at all, John, from the point of view that would it really make a difference to your clients, or do you think it's all psychological and different to worrying about the details?
No, 100% would. I mean, the quarantine requirement is really dramatically affecting some owners and their considerations of whether they come to the UK or fly overseas. it's absolutely right. So if we can get that sorted, the recovery will be much swifter.
Okay, well, with the new aviation minister in place very recently, as of last night, relative to our discussion today, let's hope we get a different listening to on that front. Right, a quick change of subject and just understanding something about transactions, because we're all working virtually. I mean, this mode is the normal rather than the abnormal right now. Your aircraft transactions, we've all been involved in the past, and there was a lot of physical involvement and on-site stuff. How have you been coping with that? I'm going to go to you first, Alex, on this. From the point of view of how you're managing the situation just shortly after lockdown versus to where you are now. How's that been?
Initially during lockdown, very difficult, I think, but I think everybody was adjusting to global lockdowns. So we had an aircraft for sale pre-lockdown, and we had interest in it during lockdown, and it was compromised by an inability to even see the aircraft. I think the experience since then is I think people have got more comfortable with that. So the physical viewing seems to be something that can be reduced or compromised while it is still possible. So various exemptions have come in to allow engineers and pilots to be able to do that, but certainly early on. But I think it's, we have an aircraft close to completion of a sale now, and it hasn't been too badly affected by it. The reverse side is we're involved in the purchase of an aircraft shortly after lockdown, and it happened in relatively normal timescales. So, but that was within the UK, which would certainly help. But that was while travel restrictions were in place. So, I think it's slowed it down, but it's been possible, and I think it's almost business as usual. I'm sure John would have a view on that as well.
Right, I'll come to you in a second, John. So, from a perspective of getting CAA support, was that involving on-site visits, or was that clearance pending arrival in the UK? What sort of approaches were they taking?
I think the authorities were actually, the CAA were very quick to acknowledge the fact that was going to have some alleviations for a while. So that didn't get in the way. It was more the physical acquisition. You want to see what you're buying, you want some certainty over the verification of the airworthiness and the maintenance history. But I think the regulator point of view was very, they did what they could immediately, I think. And I think around government regulations, that's in the wider piece about movement of people, which was obviously slowed down for a while.
Yeah, no, that's encouraging. John, what did you find?
Well, we've had to get creative to do deals, so we've done quite a few in lockdown, and we've used a lot more in-country assets rather than where we perhaps had previously travelled to visit the aircraft or had buyers come to see the aircraft. We've used video, as we always do. We've used 3D photography. We've used live video cams around the aircraft. So we've cut out the initial visual inspections. And in most cases, contracts have gone in place up front before it goes into a technical inspection. And simply there's been perhaps one visit, one collection from the buyer or their representative. So we've cut down the number of visits and travel required. And whereas perhaps before it would have been the seller or the buyer's pilots that would have done the ferry, sometimes it's been a ferry company that's achieved the result of delivering the aircraft because they've been from a better placed country to deal with it. So
no, I mean that almost sounds like it's a process improvement.
Possibly, yeah. Well, I'm not sure there's an improvement, but it's certainly we've been able to work around it in most cases.
I think, can I just say, I don't know how you feel, but I think it has reduced some of the areas where sales drag. I think people become more clinical, what they really need and what is, because they do. So as you say, somebody else closer to the aircraft can view it on your behalf. And I think some of the the requirements that sometimes drag out negotiations because they're vaguely hypothetical. Actually, people realise they haven't got time for that. It's impossible, and you get to the key points quicker.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the things that we're doing, if we reflect back, we might actually find that there's savings to be made in both time and money, and client satisfaction is not lost as a consequence of doing it in a different way. So we'll just have to see. I've heard similar stories where people have liked the new method of doing stuff, and once you've got them out of their old carpet slippers, they've actually been more comfortable with the new approach that's taken place. Right, you've also already indicated that you've had good support from regulators. I mean, is that primarily the UK, or what have you found globally when you've been dealing?
Well, I think from our point of view, we're mainly a UK. We were the UK. We have a couple of other authorities, but yeah, I think they've all. I think the UK were very, very quick. Which was a key lead. I think that helped us. And I from what I've seen of other regulators, I think they've acted very, very similarly.
John, how about you? Have you had any remote working required?
Not very much, and to be honest, everything's been handled quite well by the regulators. I don't have anything adverse to say in that respect. I mean, particularly with the extensions on licenses and simulated checks and stuff like that, they kicked in as quick as you could expect. Certainly in the UK. So I think the UKC have done a pretty good job, to be honest.
Oh, that's positive to hear. I've got to say, I'm really glad that I haven't had to do anything like I did in the past with some FAA transactions and getting DARs and DERs to try and sign things off remotely. I can't believe that would work very well in this climate at all. But
we had issues with DARs early on, and it was particularly difficult, the early stages of lockdown, getting them to travel. So, but that was the same for everyone early on.
All right. Look, it's from the point of view of the shape of this market and where it might be going. Can you see any particular new angles that we could be getting? You've said we've seen a new type of client potentially coming in. Is that from a completely different sector, or is it demographics? What's any ideas on the drivers there?
I think it's private owners that are primarily talking about, perhaps more than corporations. I think corporations are being more reserved, and private owners that need aircraft for business or even private use are seeing the need to, all of a sudden they're going to need to acquire an aircraft where perhaps they didn't before. So that's where we're seeing the main drivers.
Okay, the angle I'm sort of asking the question is the fractional ownership stuff and everything else going on in the background. I'm picking up that there's more interest in acquiring aircraft necessarily than having those part inclusion systems, as it were. What would be your take on that?
I don't get involved with the fractional programs too much, but I understand that they're doing okay. I've not heard that they're suffering too badly with that side. So, most of the work we do is with whole ownership on aircraft, and that's where we're seeing lots of grassroots inquiries. Admittedly, more bottom end than top end. And you have to spend quite a lot of time with those people. They don't want marketing or brochure. They need to understand what's involved in acquiring an aircraft. How do you own it? How do you operate it? And what's it going to cost them? So it's sometimes a longer process, but that's where we're seeing the strong interest right now.
I'll come on to you, Alex. Again, the reason I was asking that is you've already said it, John. The fractional, I've seen that quite strong. NetJets has actually carried on with a bundle of aircraft that were under threat, and they've secured positions that were under threat because the market has come back quicker than they'd expected. But if we're also seeing growth in private ownership and private acquisition, it suggests that the pie could be getting bigger as a consequence of what's going on, which has to be good news. What do you think about that, Alex?
Yeah, I think so, and I think the positive has been generated about new entrants to the market. Is back to your question, on the jet cards. I think there are less questions about it because people coming in haven't researched it, they haven't looked at it, they are coming from a grassroots point of view, as John's described it. They're fresh to it, so they're looking at it. So that must mean there are more. There's more interested in owning, chartering aircraft, which should only be a good thing. So obviously it was a very short sample period, but I think overwhelmingly it does seem to be a common pattern. You're having it as just you've got to spend more time explaining it and really trying to set the right expectations. But there's a real openness and enthusiasm, and you wouldn't necessarily expect that now. We're still very early on in any kind of recovery, and the evidence seems to be it's quite buoyant in terms of inquiries.
It's both of your comments are extremely encouraging. Okay, gentlemen, look, we've had a really good discussion here so far. I'd like to have a second session with you because there's some of the material we haven't been able to cover at this point. So I hope you can join me for that second session. I can't see any disagreement. You're nodding there, so that's excellent.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.